Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can all hear us. My name's Matthew Anderson of the Mauritanian Britain Business Council, here with Roger Nunn, my colleague. Welcome to the latest in our series of webinars. Today we're absolutely delighted that we've got Her Majesty's Ambassador Colin Wells, who arrived in Nouakchott in early April and has been finding his way around ever since and seems to have been making very good progress. We're going to invite him to talk about what his impressions, how he's found Nouakchott, some key economic, political things that have gone on in the country in his time there and his views upon those. Just a few parish notices first. We are recording this for our YouTube channel. It is also been streamed live on our Facebook page. So if you are so inclined, do give us a follow. You can also find us on LinkedIn as well. Our page there has grown and become a really quite important source of disseminating information. Indeed, some of you may actually have found out about this webinar from there. We do these sessions quite regularly, at least every month for different topics. We have several planned coming up now. We're obviously approaching the summer season, but we have several planned for the rest of the year. But we also have a trade mission planned. We are hoping that the global situation will keep improving. I know in the UK, many of you, I guess in Mauritania, have followed. We have now got more than 30 plus million people double vaccinated, therefore at a good level of protection, and another around about 80% have had one vaccination now, the adult population. So we're doing okay. We understand through looking that Mauritania is also getting vaccines now from various sources, including COVAX, of which Britain is a major contributor to that. So this is all good news. So first week of October, 3rd onwards, we hope to bring a multi-sector trade mission to Mauritania. That's our plan. And at the moment, it's on. We think we've been monitoring the situation, so that's the plan anyway. So keep an eye out on our Facebook page, our mailing list, our LinkedIn page, our Twitter page, and all those sort of things. So I'm now going to hand over to Colin. One of the topics that's always asked is visas, travel advice, that sort of thing. And I noted in these times of European football that the American State Department put out their advice yesterday, and the score is Mauritania 2, UK 3. So we are in the UK at considered a higher risk destination than Mauritania now. So on that note, I'll hand over to Colin now. And if you could tell us about your first 3 months in Nouakchott.
It's a pleasure to be invited to this and to give a webinar and to give some views. I've noted the point that Matthew said about travel advice, and I'll come to that at the end. In terms of my first impressions here, just as an individual, I find Mauritania a wonderful country to be in, to live in. I kind of knew it would be. It's the kind of place that I knew that I would enjoy living in. It's definitely hot. It's got an incredible beauty about it that maybe not everybody appreciates, but I certainly do. And I certainly find that Mauritanians, but also the expatriate community that lives in Mauritania, is extremely welcoming and happy group and people. And so it's been very easy to settle in here, and that's something I would stress. It's a pleasure to live here. The other thing I would say is I was very pleased about the UK presence we've got here. We're very small, and the embassy's only been open for three years, but we have secured through one of my predecessors a very good residence here, which is a great piece of showcase for the UK. Even in these times of COVID-19 restrictions, we're still able to do sensible COVID-friendly events that promote Britain in a positive way. And I think thirdly, congratulations to the work of my predecessor, Simon Boyden, because in his 2 years as ambassador, it's very clear to me that he did an awful lot to get the UK brand, the UK knowledge, the UK values point as far as he could with ministers, but way beyond that as well, within civil society and so on. So really good work for Simon. Simon's going on to Eswatini, but I'm sure he'll do an equally good job there. Just to very quickly take you through what my priorities are, and I've got a sort of set of objectives agreed by ministers, and in no particular order, but I'll sort of set them out in the order I've written down here. Security is a big one. Mauritania is right in the, well, not right in the centre, but a key member of the Sahel, and the 5 countries of the Sahel that represent an insecurity issue. Mauritania being a centre of the more stable partner of all of those 5, and indeed with significant security structures in place, which is a positive thing. Since the death of President Deby in Chad, the president here in Mauritania has had to take on an even more enhanced leadership role within the Sahel. So we follow these issues very closely, and Mauritania's influence there. COP26 obviously is one of the biggest after the G7, which has just happened down in Cornwall. The COP26 is now the big event that the UK will host. It's a big priority for Boris Johnson and the government, and obviously I'm engaging on that. I'll come on to COP26 in a little bit more detail later. Wider development ambitions here. Obviously, we've got quite a significant humanitarian budget for humanitarian assistance down in the southeast, where there is 70,000 Malian refugees, as well as working elsewhere with the UN in particular. So we're engaging there. Business, obviously, trying to facilitate the ability of businesses to operate, British businesses to invest in Mauritania. So that's a part of my life. I'll come on to that again a bit later. That's very important, always has been. It's important in every embassy, but it's one that I've come here hoping now I'll be able to do something very positively about. Promoting the UK, what does that mean? I mean, I'd like to see Mauritanians consider the UK, more and more Mauritanians consider the UK to be somewhere where they can visit, somewhere where they can study, somewhere where they can do business. Away from other traditional centres within mainland Europe, France, obviously, and the United States. I think we've got a great offer. That does need a visa piece to it, and I'm talking already to UK visas about increasing the numbers of visits by the visa application centre down here, so that Mauritanians can have better access to the visas they need in order to fulfil my ambitions there. So we're working on that, and I'm happy to say a bit more on that if anybody wants to know a bit later. Raising the profile of the embassy. We are a small embassy. I think we're an incredible embassy. I would say that, but I think we are. I want us to do more on social media, so to get out to Mauritanians, but everybody else, to say what we're doing, what the British are doing elsewhere, and to inform Mauritanians more about what the British values are, what the British are doing in the world, and what we're doing in Mauritania. So if I can very quickly plug, if you haven't already followed us on Facebook, it's UK and Mauritania. On Twitter, we're UK and Mauritania as well, but also Colin Wells UK as well. So please follow, and we'll try more and more push out what I hope will be interesting pieces for you. So that's my priorities. Very happy to talk on any of those, or any that you might think I've missed, which is completely possible, of course. On COP26, this has come up a lot lately because, of course, it's getting quite urgent, isn't it? It's COP26 is obviously the Conference of Parties. It's known as the UN Climate Change Conference. It's going to be held in Glasgow in the first half of November. It's an extraordinary opportunity for the world to come together and set serious standards in climate change, reducing carbon emissions throughout the world, and just resetting that piece in the direction that gets us to a kind of zero carbon footprint by 2050, which is our ambition. And in that, there's financing to enable countries like Mauritania to be able to try and to change their model here to one where it will be carbon neutral. So in the last 2 days, I've had Janet Rogan, the Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Africa and Middle East on COP26 in town, and we've had, indeed you're the first people I'm telling about this because I haven't even reported all to London yet, but we had a call on the President yesterday, and that went extremely well, and he was clearly aware and briefed, and I think feels very strongly that environmental issues, climate change does actually pose not just a problem for some of the sort of most obvious things like the desertification and the threat from the seas as well. But also in terms of security, because climate change may lead to a conflict over scarce waters or scarce lands, and it also doesn't recognise international frontiers. So these are big issues. We had met a range of ministers, and all senior ministers, from environment, which is obvious, to finance and economy. We met BP. We met a very good group of about 10 SMEs working in renewable energy and environmental areas, and so recycling and so on. We saw the World Bank, UNDP, diplomatic partners, as well as meeting archiving scholars as well. So we had a very full program. The outcome of that, I think, is the president will definitely be, I'm very, very confident the president, Ghazouani, will be in Glasgow first for the World Leaders Summit in the 1st and 2nd of November. That's good. We also encourage to help the environment minister with some of the necessary pre-summit requirements, such as what's called an NDC, which is a nationally determined contribution. Very technical paper, but very important. It sets out Mauritania's follow-up since Paris in 2015, sorry. And but also we talked through, what kind of things the president, but also the Mauritanian delegation can be doing, and there'll be further discussions. So I think my headlines there: President Ghazouani definitely engaged, Mauritanians definitely going to be there. There's definitely an understanding within government about the importance of what's going to happen in Glasgow in November on them, and there's opportunities of that, and that's important. So follow-up will be key for the British Embassy, but also our international partners, the European Union, United States, Japan, France, and others. So that's COP26. I thought that went very well. Politically, I know Matthew encouraged me to sort of say a few words on the political environment here. Actually, overnight, some of you who've been reading the Mauritanian newspapers may have picked up that there's a story about the former president Aziz being jailed. We're following that carefully. I have to say that Nouakchott feels very stable, which is often the first question people ask me is when something like that happens. I haven't got any more to comment on that, except that, as I say, Nouakchott feels stable. We're looking, obviously, trying to get into the detail of that. There was a reshuffle, always important. Reshuffles in government, it gives an interesting indication about what's happening. The reshuffle was prompted by the need for one minister to depart to take an international position. I think my impression of that was that it was a small reshuffle. The key ministers in key areas, they're all key, but defence, foreign policy, economy, finance, environment, for me, because of COP26, they all remained in place. And the departure of the health minister was, I think, the one surprise I had. But he was replaced by somebody who was within the ministry, and we're seeing that the vaccination campaign is starting to kick off very slowly, very slow vaccination pace, which was a worry. But the stats, I was talking to the UN a couple of days ago, there's been an acceleration that needs to continue, and it needs to include the vulnerable, particularly vulnerable in the Mauritanian community. But let's see. So overall, it was a small reshuffle. Got a good media, but I thought you still see a government full of, in my opinion, and this is my impressions of the many ministers that I've met in my first 3 months here, is very skilled, intelligent, technocratic almost ministers on top of the detail. They know very much know their brief, and really like engaging the UK. And I think I've already covered when I talked earlier about the political environment. I'm following very closely how the security situation in the other Sahelian countries plays into Mauritania at the moment. It hasn't affected the security situation that I see on the ground. but we follow that very carefully. And as I said earlier, Mauritania will play a very key role in the future of the Sahel, particularly as we see the French position in Mali and the tri-border area changing slightly over the next months and years. Finally, I'll just say some things on business opportunities, and then throw open. Oh no, I'll say something on the travel advice as well. But from my calls from the president, ministers, to much wider than that, the British stock here, the British brand here is good. We're held high. I think that's what's driving that. I think two things that are the most obvious. One is the opening of the British Embassy. You know, that did matter, and it was an important thing. And the activity that my two predecessors have carried out has raised the profile of the UK in a positive way. Second is, of course, the increasing British presence here, led by, particularly by BP, obviously. They're a big player here on the British side. But that's because of that investment which is coming through, and the careful relationship that they've developed with two countries, Senegal and Mauritania, that's given quite significant, that's had benefits for the wider sort of British interest here, including for the embassy. So every time I go into the door, through the door, they talk about the BP investment with significant, with evident positivity, and therefore interest in what else might be also available from the UK, is I think the way I would summarise that. What else would I say here? So opportunities definitely exist. I think you would obviously need to have a product or service that is needed in Mauritania. I think that's probably obvious, but it would definitely, you know, something new in it, and bright in whatever areas, whether that's in everything from English language to renewable energy generation. These are if you think you've got products that might work in Mauritania, certainly. I'll signpost a couple of places where you can go to get advice, including the British Embassy. But what I would say is Mauritania is a very big country. In a recent meeting, I said that you could get two Senegals, Cote d'Ivoire and Guinea into Mauritania, but it only has 7% of the population. It's quite interesting fact, because you've got a small population, therefore you need to think about that in terms of the market, but a very big country where that might have logistical issues for you. But I like the potential that Mauritania has. I would also say that you need patience and understanding as you come in. Things might not work as quickly as you want, and indeed power cuts sometimes happen and interrupt the way you work here a bit. Important partners, I think. Look, I'll be open with you. DIT pulled their resources from the embassy here. So I don't have any dedicated trading investment resources here. I do try my best, as my deputy, my fantastic team here, to try and support those British businesses that have questions and have an interest here, and are interested here. But so we will try our best, but I would signpost other organisations. The MBBC, obviously, is a great place in which to sort of meet and listen and learn about Mauritania. So definitely give them a plug. Invest in Africa, and they've been an organisation that my predecessor Simon Boyden and I value. They also have representation here, so I would flag Invest in Africa. Their local representative is by chance I have his card in front of me, Boko Alpha, and Will Pollen is in the UK. The other day, I also met for the first time Asita Lam, who is head of the investment promotion agency here in Mauritania. And I was very impressed, I'd say, with the setup there. And I'm going to try and have a few more meetings to see what value she can and her team can provide for British businesses. But I'm definitely keen to try and reduce, at the very least, the amount of paperwork and bureaucracy involved. Talk about one-stop shops and stuff like that. Finally, I would say the Mauritanian embassy in London is they've got a very good ambassador. I've worked with him, and I think they are keen on promoting, obviously, Mauritania as a place to visit but also to do business. And so you might want to go there. Briefly, on the travel advice, there's two angles to travel advice. One is the travel advice for British visitors coming here, where you'll see most of the countries sort of red and maybe amber. I'm in the process of reviewing that. It's out of place with travel advice provided by the Americans and the French, for example. So we're in the process of renewing that. I won't say any more than that at this stage because it's early days, but we recognise it needs changing. The other aspect is I think that the COVID-19 pandemic and what that means for coming to Mauritania. The official position of the Mauritanian government is that people who start their journey in the United Kingdom must quarantine for 10 days, I think. It's in our travel advice, 10 days on arrival. And that's also the same for people who started their journeys in India, Brazil, and South Africa. And the obvious connection there is to the variants. I'm not going to say that's a completely logical position, because there are people with quite significant rates of those variants in other countries. But that is the regulation, and that's in the travel advice. You will need to think about that. You will also need to think about and keep an eye on our own traffic light system. At the moment, Mauritania is amber, and so at the moment, when you try to come here and you go back to the UK, you will need to go through the self-isolation processes that are in place for the travellers from amber-listed countries. I think I'll pause there, Matthew, Roger, and I'm sure there's lots I've left out, but I'm very, very happy to answer questions. And I do want to sort of leave the impression with everybody that we're open for business here. I'm very approachable, and don't feel in any way that you can't drop an email or anything like that. You can, and I'm always delighted to hear from you.
Thank you, Colin. I mean, I guess your comments about the DIT resource there, you can always rely on us. Obviously, we're private sector led rather than government, but our role is to try and help the trade side here, and you can rely on us in the absence of government support. Okay, I'm gonna. There's a few questions coming through on the chat now.
Oh, really?
I'm going to pass over to Roger now, who will handle those better than I will, admirably. But thank you very much for your debut here on the on MBBC.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Indeed, yes. Thank you, Colin. That's great. If I may, Colin, I'll start the ball rolling with one, and that is there's been a fair amount of discussion in the UK press recently about the reductions in the overseas aid budget that the UK government's considering. Is there any sense of what impact, if any, that reduction would have on Mauritania and the UK's interaction with Mauritania?
Well, thank you. That's a very good question. And there isn't an ambassador in the world that is delighted to see the reduction of ODA. It's a necessity. It's a budgetary necessity in London, but it has meant that we are going to see cuts in ODA spend, certainly across the Sahel, in terms of and there has been, and as well as throughout Africa and the world, and that has been necessary. Of course, the government has committed itself to move it back up to 0.7% as soon as possible. Also point out as well that at 0.5%, which is what we're coming down to, we're still well ahead of the mark of other development and humanitarian funders. So our record remains good, but it is something that the British government and certainly every ambassador would like to have avoided. But we are where we are. In terms of Mauritania, with no projects that I'm aware of, no projects have been cut. That's probably because we weren't exactly doing that much, and what projects that we did have were humanitarian and have survived, so to speak. My job will be to try and see that, firstly, as best as possible, the case is put in place to retain that spend here, so we retain our commitment to managing Mauritania's refugee commitment, for instance, as an example. Secondly, to see that when we start generating that, going back up to 0.7%, that actually we've got plans in place to be able to attract some of that money to Mauritania. And I'm using legacy DFID advisors to bringing them in to help me do that. When I say legacy DFID, you obviously realise Foreign and Commonwealth Office and DFID merged. So wonderful.
Very good, thank you. We've got a question here from Hadi Fawzi at the Scottish Development Agency in Glasgow. It's a follow-up on the COP26, on your COP26 remarks. Interested to know what level of priority renewable and clean energy currently enjoys in Mauritania, and you know, given your sort of sense of that, how that attitude, that stance might feed through into the delegates attending in Glasgow in November.
Yeah, very good question. Look, there is very little. I mean, when you drive around here, you do see some wind farms, and there has been some investment in the wind farm and solar farms here, but it's small in comparison to the needs of the country. I think there is, I would say that there is definitely an appreciation that renewable energy is the way forward, and that there are long-term benefits to that in terms of cheaper electricity. Of course, electricity is very expensive, but also moving Mauritania towards its goal of zero carbon emissions, or carbon neutral by 2050. But that will involve quite significant changes in direction and investment. And that's the point, I think, that the Mauritanian government will be coming, one of the priorities the Mauritanian government will be looking for when they come to Glasgow will be, great, we should go in this direction, and but we will need help with the financing of that, and that every developing country, if they're sensible, will be saying exactly the same thing. Last thing I would say, second thing I'd say, and I hope this has been helpful to the questioner. The other thing I'd say is, at the moment, where I think there is scope to do more is in more remote communities in delivering renewable energy packages. Well, I've heard them described as off-grid, but yeah, there are, and they can be provided to quite, not big communities, not cities, but communities that might have a school in them, and or a fish port or something like that. Seeing that that can be done in a renewable way rather than plugging into the oil and coal-based electrical production system that there is here. And that is, I think, an area where I'm going to try and explore whether there are opportunities for UK companies there, because I think the UK offer on renewable is extraordinary. And I saw that when I served in India doing trade and investment work in India. It's extraordinary. And I think we can, that's, I think, where we might be able to say, actually, the British product's great, and here are the companies that can deliver it. So I think you'll see it as a growth area.
Keep your questions coming in, folks. We've got one from Robert Hurley, who represents the Glyconics company. It's quite a detailed question, so I will paraphrase. Forgive me, Robert. I hope I get it more or less right. His company has developed a handheld diabetes screening device for use in the field, which is a proprietary invention. So his couple of key questions are, firstly, what's the prevalence of diabetes in Mauritania? So does he have a market to look at? And secondly, what's the regulatory approval process for medical devices? That's quite a detailed question, but
yeah, and I'm not going to be able to answer any of those. And there's a third and a fourth question as well, but those are all good questions, Robert. And actually, that's the kind of question that would have been answered by a DIT person, resource, if we'd had them in post. And that's where, for instance, with our resources here, we might struggle. But what I suggest to you, Robert, is drop me a line with those, because they're a bit too technical for me to answer here. But from reading your message, what I do see is you've got an incredible product there. That actually, if there is a need here, then the medical authorities, the Department of Health might be very interested. So drop me a line. My email address is colin.wells2. By the way, Colin is C-O-L-I-N. A lot of people put 2 L's in, and the email never gets to me. So colin.wells2 at FCO, Foreign and Commonwealth Office,
You talked about, you know, brand UK, how UK is perceived, what the opportunities are for us. Just a few thoughts on the competition. You know, I guess there's China, Turkey, always internationally active. The EU, of course. And any thoughts on where they are and how active they are and the kinds of areas they're active in?
In terms of businesses here, I wouldn't necessarily say those were the front line in terms of the competition here. I think you'll be looking at France. I mean, if you'll be looking at Mauritanian companies, would be first of all, are obviously very active in Mauritania. And in terms of the international competition, you might be looking at existing European, Canadian companies, Australian companies that are here. The China, the UAE, you mentioned Turkey. Turkey's here. They are, some of them are, some of it's in terms of sort of classic businesses is in the fishing sector, but China invests very heavily in construction. It's construction and other big projects that that the government would like to see. So the other day, I attended an opening session where the president also attended, which was for a flyover. Those come at a price. So it's whether that's, I think that gives China and the UAE some kudos here, but whether it gives them the sort of respect that the UK companies might get or European companies might get in the market here, I'm not so sure. So I think Roger, they're very different. They're very different things. I don't see UAE companies here in the way that I see European companies here. I think what you see is investments in solid projects, a hotel complex, but there isn't tourism here yet. A flyover, very important for the infrastructure of this country. Yeah, so I think I'll pause at that. Early days with me for in terms of sort of understanding. What I will say though is that we do need to look at what those the influence that those countries have actually throughout the region, throughout Africa, but in the region, because their engagement here is significant. It's financial, and it's certainly the UK won't be able to match the kind of investment that China is doing. And so we need to think what our offer is to Mauritania and to other countries in Africa, which is going to be very different.
Good, thank you. Question from Bill Law at The Gulf Matters. Asks if you could provide more detail on how the security situation in the wider Sahel region could impact Mauritania, something about the robustness of the security structures in country, what role Mauritania is playing in the Sahel G5, and what role can the UK play to assist in security in the region?
Yeah, okay, I can try and answer some of that. Firstly, I think the risk to Mauritania of the insecurity in the other countries will be on the possible growth of armed groups and terrorist groups in those areas that might then spill over into Mauritanian territory. My analysis at the moment is that the Mauritanian government and armed forces has a significant presence in the border areas that are of concern. That there isn't an impact at the moment, but obviously we'll see that they will want to augment that if the either with on the ground on the Mauritanian side of the border, or by engaging more in finding solutions elsewhere in the countries of concern if the situation deteriorates in Mali or Burkina Faso or Niger or indeed Chad. Although Chad is a long way away, Chad themselves were a provider of military forces, peacekeeping forces in the tri-border area between Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali. If that was withdrawn, it hasn't been withdrawn, if that was withdrawn, then it could itself be an issue. And that's where Mauritania will play a key role, will be in influencing the new administrations in those areas. I don't think that there's any, I don't think the Mauritanian government thought that the transition in Mali recently was a good thing, but nevertheless, they're going to have to engage with the new administration in Mali. Now, what is Britain doing? Britain is already got a footprint. We're on the ground in Mali and assisting the UN and other forces with logistical support in Mali. I have my defense attaché coming tonight, in fact, for a second visit in 6 weeks, and that's good because I want him to be on top of exactly what the Mauritanian armed forces are doing, can do here, but also where the UK can assist them in providing, whether it's training support or other types of support, in making sure that they can deliver their security mandate.
Thank you very much. Unless I'm doing somebody a gross injustice, I think we've come to the end of the questions. So I think we will probably draw a line under it at that point. So it remains for me to just repeat the parish announcement that Matt mentioned at the outset, our intention to bring a multi-sector trade mission down to Nouakchott starting the 3rd of October, COVID and various other things permitting. So Robert, that will be a great opportunity for you to bring the diabetes device down and come and meet some local businessmen on the ground and see if you can find a local partner. And it's open to.
There was a third question that's coming on the Q&A.
Is there? Yeah, just coming. Good. Well, let's ask that one then. This is from Ahmedou Mohamed El Mokhtar. He asks, he's the managing director of Alcom. Welcomes you, Colin, to Mauritania. So his questions are, what's the status with respect to direct flights from the UK to Mauritania? Are there any plans for that? And also, is there any plan for direct sea shipping lines from the UK for better trade? And Ahmedou's asked the question that I'm sure you always expect to be asked, but I'll ask it again, and that's, is there any chance of moving the visa centre from Rabat into Nouakchott itself?
I have this horrible feeling I'm going to end this on a very negative note, because I think the answers to all of those is no. So a lot of this, and it's all down to what is financially viable. So I'm aware of no airliners considering doing, or shipping liners considering direct links. And I think that at the moment, that airlines are desperate to get existing links back up and running, and so we'll see what the situation is like, and what will play importantly in this will be the growth in the economy in Mauritania, because that will see more travel. On visas, I think it's going to be a gradual step by step. At the moment, there isn't sufficient numbers of people wishing to go to the UK to warrant having a very costly physical presence here for a visa centre. So the best we can do at the moment is for me to try and organise quarterly visits down here for the company that runs the Visa Access Centre. Give them the ability to work in my residence, so that they're not having to put out costs for renting a hotel room or what have you. And from that process of then providing a visa service, seeing how many people could go, see how viable, how attractive British visas are to Mauritanians, we may then get the numbers to a level where a presence here might be possible. The only other thing I could think of on encouraging the Visa Access Centre to be the application centre to be here in Mauritania, as I've seen in other postings in Mumbai when I was there, is that the company would not just provide visa application services for the British, but also Europeans, the Chinese and others. And so it might well be that some other embassies might want to do business with TLS, the company that operates in Rabat. So it's a long-term ideal. In the short term, I want to see more regular visits by the Visa Application Centre, so that Mauritanians can plan.
Super. Let's call that a qualified positive, shall we? So that we so that we can end on a good note. Look, Colin, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and for answering our questions. Real pleasure. You know, one big positive out of this is that you're there, you've got your feet under the desk, and you've made it very clear that you know, you're open for business and happy to interact with you know, with people looking to strengthen business and investment ties between our two countries. So I think that's great. That is positive news. So we'll end on that. Thanks again. Thank you very much to those of you that participated in this event. Those of you that asked questions and those of you that sat and digested it. That is great. Watch this space for future MBBC events as and when we announce them. And as Matt said at the outset, you can catch up this event on our YouTube channel in a few days' time. So with that, thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.